Midjourney has released the long-awaited Omni-Reference. Omni-Reference, or OREF, can be best thought of as a system for saying, put this into my image. You can use it with Midjourney's V7 model to place characters, objects, logos, animals, and so much more into new images. I have several examples to share, but first let's start with the basics. To use Omni-Reference on the website, drag your image over to the Imagine bar and drop it here where it says Omni-Reference. Make sure you have V7 selected in your settings before you do this. If you have V6 selected, it will say Character Reference here. Alternatively, you can type --OREF and then paste your image URL directly into the prompt. This is what you'll need to do if you're using Omni-Reference on Discord. This reference image is a character who I've named Wesley, and here are some of my results when I use him as an Omni-Reference. Your Omni-Reference doesn't have to be a Midjourney created image, you can use external images. Unlike Character Reference in V6, Omni-Reference should work just as well with external images as it does with Midjourney created images. So if you want, you can create all kinds of selfies or become a character in your own story with much higher consistency compared to CREF in V6. Omni-Reference is also much smarter about things like camera angles. In V6, it's not uncommon for a character's head to be placed on backwards when the camera POV is more from behind the character. That just doesn't seem to happen with Omni-Reference in V7. It's much smarter about understanding where the character's head or face should be relative to the camera angle. Omni-Reference does have a weight parameter --OW, which takes values from 0 to 1000, where 100 is the default value. Use lower values if you want the result to be less similar to your reference, and higher values for higher similarity. Lower values can also give you a bit more flexibility if you're trying to create an image that is in a different style compared to your reference. In this example, I specified a film type in my prompt, which works really well with the lower weights, but as the weight increases, the film style of my Omni-Reference image, which is more vintagey, actually begins to overpower the prompt. But once I hit a weight of 50, every result looked like Wesley, and it's so much more accurate compared to using CREF in V6. Here I wanted an illustration style, and the lower Omni-Weights worked much better for this. And one more example where I used this blue orb as an Omni-Reference. Once I got to a weight of 50, then I started seeing results that looked really similar to the input reference, and it got even better at 100. So 100 is a great default value for Omni-Weight, but just know that you might need to make some adjustments depending on what type of result you're trying to get. At times, I have noticed some quality degradation and just weird things that start to happen when OW is higher than about 400 or 500, so be careful with using those higher weights. For me, the best range has been between 50 and 250. Let's go through some more examples. A lot of objects work really well as OREFs, as you just saw with the blue orb. Here I used a coffee mug with rockets on it, and even at a weight of 50, the results match incredibly well to the input mug, down to the colors and placements of the rockets and even the little starbursts. I'm really impressed with how well this matches the reference. You can use clothing as a reference and place it onto new characters like I did here. This t-shirt reference is just a mock-up that I made using a Midjourney image as the design. Unfortunately, we can't use multiple Omni references at the moment, for example, having separate images for a character and the clothing that you want them to wear. That will come eventually. Until then, you can utilize the editor to replace faces or add in new characters. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Next, here's an example where I used this scene of a city street and buildings. The part of the prompt that gives context for this reference image is where I say that she is standing on a city street. Midjourney recognizes the city street scene in my reference, and you can see in 3 out of the 4 images here we get that tall building in the back with the black spire, and even the buildings on the sides of the street are the same colors as the reference. Then I ran a similar prompt using the city as the OREF, but I also used it as a style reference. This is really important if you want to start building cohesive looking storyboards with the same style. Not only is the style more consistent across these results, but the scene is too. Speaking of using style references, this goes for mood boards too. If your input reference is a different style compared to what you want to create, for example, you have an illustration style reference and you want to use a photographic style SREF code, you may need to lower your Omni-Weight. I recommend going down to 50. If your weight is too high, the style of your OREF can begin to overpower your style reference. You kind of have to play with it a bit to get the right combination, and you want to be sure to reinforce the style that you want directly in your prompt. Alright, so what if you want to place 2 characters into a scene? The same tricks that we use in the V6 models also apply to V7. I'll leave some reference videos down below. First, you can try using a reference that includes both characters. This can work surprisingly well and much better than if you were to try this with CREF in V6. Just make sure that you describe the characters in your prompt so that Midjourney understands that both characters should appear in the results. If you don't have a 2-character image, you can utilize the editor and CREF with the V6 models to add new characters or replace faces. Omni-Reference unfortunately cannot be used in the editor yet. I used this Omni-Reference to create a new V7 image for this character where she's standing in a supply store. I sent that image to the editor and expanded the scene to add room for a second character. Up in the prompt bar, I switched to version 6.1, added my second character as a character reference, and set the character weight to 0. Then I updated the prompt to include him. I also added the image of the woman as a style reference to ensure that I got a similar style in the regions that would be painted in. And here's one of the results. It does pretty well as a workaround for multiple character images for now, but I'm really looking forward to when we can use multiple Omni-references and use Omni-references in the editor. I have a video on getting multiple characters into a scene that I'll link below, but those are a few examples of what you can do with the new Omni-reference. I want to wrap up with a few more tips to help you get the most out of OREF. First, crop your input reference as needed. If you just want to use a character from the image, crop it down to just the character. Midjourney will look at your entire image and in combination with your prompt will figure out what parts of your reference to use. If your character is surrounded by palm trees and buildings, it's more likely that those elements will bleed into the results, which is why my next tip is to be specific with your prompt and add redundancy as needed. You need to provide Midjourney with context for your reference image. In this example, I'm using an iridescent object as my reference, then I prompted for a frog on a moss-covered tree. With this prompt, Midjourney has absolutely no context for what to do with my reference image. It sort of applies some of the colors to the frog, but at a weight of 100, nothing in these images resembles the reference. But if I change the prompt to include an iridescent, bulbous, hexagonal frog, now I'm giving Midjourney context for my reference. Essentially, I want the frog and the object to be merged, and that's exactly what I get in these results. This tip goes for things like character outfits and anything else in your reference image that you want represented in the results. If the character is holding something in your reference image and you want that in your results, make sure that you say the character is holding an object and what that object is. If you need clothing to match the input reference, describe the clothing in your prompt. Take Wesley, for example. If I just prompt for a photo of a man, the results match his face, the film style, and the overall environment is similar, but we don't match his clothing. Even if I increase the weight to 300, we get similar results. But if I add red and white plaid shirt to the prompt, the results are highly similar to the reference. Check out some of the details like where the diagonal stripes on his pocket are. And if I want to put him in a different scene, I need to describe that scene in the prompt. Omni-reference is so powerful that it can nearly recreate your reference image. And for an even closer match, include it as both an image reference and an Omni-reference. I can see this being really helpful for getting different angles within the same scene while we wait for Midjourney's 3D feature to come out. Lastly, be aware of other parameters that can affect your results when using Omni-reference. High stylized values, the new experimental parameter EXP, weird, chaos, personalization, mood boards, and style references can all impact how closely your character or object matches to your reference image. If you tend to work with higher stylized values, you might also want to work with higher Omni-weights, or consider lowering your stylized value. I'm still testing the capabilities of Omni-reference, but I have to say I'm pretty impressed so far, and it feels like a big leap forward compared to character reference in V6. If you'd like to see some more examples from my initial testing, I've got another video up over on Patreon where I also post monthly prompt collections and other Midjourney guides. I'll likely do a deeper dive into OREF in the future once V7 stabilizes a bit. And if you found this video helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, all the things. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.